Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, From Zero to 2.7 Million, How Verizon Media Embraced Open Source to Accelerate Release Velocity. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You should see your GoToWebinar control panel in the upper right-hand corner of your computer screen. You have joined the presentation listening using your computer speaker system by default. If you prefer to join over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. If you have selected mic and speakers and having any difficulty hearing me, please toggle the telephone option in your control panel and dial in. If you're experiencing any issues, please type the details in the question section of your control panel. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect them and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Today's webinar is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view the recording. I would now like to pass the mic over to Alissa, Lydon, Product Marketing Manager at Sauce Labs, who will be introducing the webinar.
Thanks for the introduction, Sam, and hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Alissa Lydon. I work in the product marketing department here at Sauce Labs, and we are really excited to host Verizon Media today as they tell their story about how they adopted continuous integration and continuous testing best practices to meaningfully scale their development efforts, increase release velocity, and improve productivity. As Sam mentioned earlier, this session is being recorded. We're going to send it out to everyone in a few days. I also want to thank everyone who pre-submitted questions before the webinar when they registered. We're definitely going to get to some of those questions, but again, if any other questions pop up during the presentation, make your way over to the questions pane in your attendee control panel and enter those, and I'll be moderating the Q&A at the end. And so without any further ado, I would like to introduce our presenter for today's session. Venu Narayanabhatla is a Director of Software Development Engineering at Verizon Media. He has led the developer platform services and core platforms team at Verizon Media for over 15 years, and he brings decades of experience working in the technology industry with him to today's session. I am speaking on behalf of Sauce Labs when I say we are very honored to have him here today to talk about his experiences in building CI/CD and continuous testing at scale. And with that, take it away, Venu.
Sure. Thank you, Alissa. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining the webinar. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Venu Narayanabhatla. I am one of the leaders in the developer platforms and services in core platforms at Verizon Media. I have close to 25 years of software development, platforms, infrastructure, CI/CD, and quality engineering experience. I have worked on several products, communication products such as Messenger, sponsored search applications, advertising and data platforms, platform engineering, cloud compute, and now developer platforms and services. So engineering excellence and CI/CD is my passion, and I'm very happy to talk about a subject that I am passionate about. I'm going to go through a bunch of slides on how we at Verizon Media embraced open source, CI/CD, and continuous testing. A little bit about Verizon Media. Verizon Media is home to media, technology, communication products that are loved and used at scale and trusted by people and users everywhere. There are several brands that are in our portfolio, like AOL, HuffPost, Yahoo Homepage, Finance, Sports, Mail, TechCrunch, and several others. Yes, we have a lot of products that users love and are used at scale. The challenge is how do we adopt CI/CD and testing at scale? That's the topic of discussion. That's the journey that we're going to talk about today. So our engineers develop and manage thousands of mobile applications, server apps, and then in 2012, we had a situation where teams were creating for each of their needs. There were release process specific to the teams. There were testing, both manual and automated, that were very specific and localized to their teams. And we were releasing software sometimes quarterly, sometimes monthly, sometimes a few times in a year, different release cycles. And we realized the need to have practices that would enable software to be reached to users at a very rapid pace. And that was the context of what we wanted to do around the time. The overall products were in different scenarios. Some products would read fast, some products would reach at their own pace. So we wanted to have consistent practices that every team can embrace. Most of the teams were relying on combination of both manual and automation testing. They were relying on release process that were specific to their teams. So we needed a continuous integration testing solution that would scale to our volume, that would scale to our products, and that would allow us to go to the users at a very rapid pace. Solution. So we committed to continuous integration and continuous delivery. So the leadership at Verizon Media, Lydon, Yahoo, they committed to this whole transformation into continuous delivery. So there were several trainings, teams assembled. There were coaches giving us coaching in terms of how we can move from traditional waterfall into agile and scrum methodologies, how we could organize our user stories, how we would organize our backlogs, and what is the best way to take these backlogs, convert them into releases, features that customers can adopt. But what we realized is the core of everything is CI. Teams have to continuously integrate their code, and that is the primary way of primary mechanism of how the stories can be released to the users. So we basically quickly realized that CI/CD is not only beneficial, it is absolute critical for our company to leverage and move forward. So we integrated CI/CD into product development. During those days, I was in the advertising and data platforms. I was part of the systems that were developing products. So we moved from traditional waterfall releases to Scrum methodologies. We figured out how to, we worked with the then centralized CI/CD team to set up builds. We set up pipelines, flows in terms of how builds would get further into the pipeline. We realized that there needs to be a heavy investment in automation. Quality has to be a core in everything we do, and it has to come all the way from the lowest bit of code, which is a commit from a developer, and to at every stage where the product will be certified. So we quickly assembled models in terms of how we package the software. For example, we had to really make sure that every piece of code has to be thoroughly tested at a unit test level, then at a library level. Then we have subsystems that could be either UI or API certified at that level. Then they are all subsystems assembled together as a system, and then there needs to be end-to-end certification at that level. There's a lot of packaging need. There's a lot of re-architecting the applications so they can coexist as small libraries, small components, subsystems. They're all tagged into various states of versions, like it could be stable versions, it could be certified versions, it could be production releasable versions, and then the whole system as a whole gets released into production. And at that point of time, how the software can be enabled to the users in the right way. So this whole enchilada of moving from waterfall into CI/CD was a huge effort from the team. At that point of time, we also realized that there is a need for a a centralized build infrastructure and tooling, because at some point, all the softwares, libraries, they all depend on each other, and there need to be a consistent mechanism to build the software, to test the software, and to launch the software to our users. We also had to make sure that the way that we build, certify the systems have to be secure. They have to adhere to the security standards that are very important for the company and for the industry. And we have teams that are specialists in the programming languages, could be Java, Node.js, C, C++, Python, any language, Golang, any language you mention. There are core technology teams that are specialists in their languages. They will really define what are the best practices of packaging the software, best practice of building your software, testing your software. So we thought we should leverage their expertise to build templates or platforms for the teams to use. So, and then we also felt that we should provide centralized build infrastructure that can enable the building of this software at a faster pace, and all the security performance components built into them. So what we did at the time is we built and operated Screwdriver, which is our open source continuous delivery product at Verizon Media. This product has had a history of multiple versions. At the moment, the latest version of Screwdriver, version 4, it is developed as open source, developed with the open source first mindset. So anything we develop is available on open source right away. And then we endorse and accept external contributions. We have a partner that we work with, which is Yahoo Japan. They partner with us as well. They participate and also develop a lot of features, work with us. So the software, once we develop, gets released to open source several times. And at that point of time, the Verizon Media would get the software just like any other company, and we operate the software for the builders at Verizon Media at a scale. This allowed us to really innovate in terms of how we could define the CI/CD pipelines, how we could build our systems, and how they can be integrated well into test cycles, certification mechanisms, and launch to production. As a result of this, we were able to move the release cycles from several months, sometimes several quarters, into pretty much releasing at will. Little bit about Screwdriver. Screwdriver is an open source build platform for continuous delivery. This primarily, it really allows us to do the secure continuous integration and delivery. So a basic premise is you build your software, you test it. At that point, you want to publish your software either as an artifact, either to an artifactory or a Docker registry or where you like. And once the artifacts are published, you certify the artifact, and you like to deploy the code into your target deployment system. It could be a public cloud, a private cloud, on-prem. It could be a mobile. It could be a mobile itself, or it could be a hybrid of all these systems. That's the core of it. And it gets integrated with your daily habits. So daily habits for a developer is you want to always be able to develop the code and commit it. At that point of time, the code should be able to channel through your pipeline and get into a releasable state and gets released. So you commit, you test, and you release. That's the primary daily habit that Screwdriver enables you. The biggest feature for Screwdriver is you can pretty much define your pipeline as a code. You could configure your pipelines. You could pretty much say, I want to kick off the pull request builds. I want to commit, and then I want to use a particular Docker container as an image where I would execute all my build steps, and then I would call all my steps in terms of what is the setup, what is the dependencies that I would depend on at that point of time, what and how I should test my software, publish the software, and once you publish, you would be able to define where you want to deploy the software. And once you deploy the software, you'd be able to say pretty much at the end of your pipeline what you would like to do send confirmations to your Slack channels, emails, whatever you like. So we enable you to define your pipelines as code in XML format, YAML format. Another big advantage is you can run our screwdriver anywhere. So currently, our builds are executed in Kubernetes platform. Our software runs on AWS. Our mobile builds are executed using Jenkins as an executor. So we have pretty much our software. Using our software, you can plug in any type of executor. It could be Kubernetes, it could be EC2 AWS, or it could be any Docker, anything that you like to. So that enables us to run the software anywhere. So secure CI/CD, integrate with your daily habits, define your pipeline as a code, and you want to run anywhere. And you have several features, advanced workflow features, like you can fan in, fan out of your pipelines. We have build metrics available to you. You could look at how your builds are performing over a period of time. There is advanced caching options available. I'm not going over all the features, but name any feature that you would like that's available for us. We have a unique feature where a software developer can build a template on, so you can define your own template on how you would like to build, test, publish your software. The template is a mechanism where developers can define how the software can be built, and that can be used by your teams on a daily basis to build their software. Some of the stats that we have close to 50K daily builds that happen on a regular basis here. Several projects. The projects are around 45K plus. We support close to 10 plus programming languages. That's the number, but pretty much any major language that we use is supported. And we have our huge footprint of build infrastructure, close to 500 boxes divided into several clusters. So these are the stats that we use, and this on a daily basis, and it's just increasing in footprint. Yeah. So this is a quote from our open source guru at Verizon Media, Gil Yehuda, who is a senior director of open source. Making Screwdriver open source has really allowed our internal team of talented developers to show the prowess of the software to the external world. And as developers outside, you could collaborate, you could add features. It is permissible under Apache license, and it's free. So I would welcome all of you to try this software, contribute to it. We are available on Twitter. I think we're going to be available on Twitter. We are available on Tumblr as a blog post, and we also have an open source Slack channel where you could ask questions and we can communicate. Yeah, learn more regarding Screwdriver at screwdriver.cd. So I want to talk about the journey of deep integration of continuous integration delivery with continuous testing, how continuous testing got into the thick skin of CI. This is a basic CD pipeline. As a developer, you would come in, you would want to make a component build, you want to test it, and you want to package it. That's a cycle that you would go. And then you want to deploy this into test environments, test it out again. You would like to now deploy it in canary systems and make sure it works fine, or a beta or alpha, how you would like to call. And then at that point, you would deploy it to production and test it there. A very simple CI/CD pipeline. Failure on any of these steps would halt your CD. So you would like to take your code in all the way to production in a pipeline. Right now, I have shown only a component build. It could be component build could be a part of a subsystem, a UI system, or it could be an API, it could be messaging, it could be a database build, you can name anything. And then you can have a system of all these subsystems, like UI talking to API, talking to database, talking to messaging software, etc. And then you test it, the whole system together in a canary, and you deploy it. Some of my thoughts on the test philosophy, you probably are aware, but primarily The way we would go about this whole testing philosophy is most of the testing is done at the unit test level. You really want to make sure your code is thorough, of high quality at the lowest level of your software. Developer has access to code when he's committing, and that's the place where you would like to make sure that it has extensive coverage. And the coverages go all the way from above 95% to 100%. It is possible to make sure that your code has that level of coverage at the unit test level. And while you go up, it could be a UI or it could be an API layer where you want to have more tests. And then as you move forward towards the end-to-end, you want to have fewer tests, but going through complex workflows. So unit tests, UI, and ETE. It could basically, you could follow the same pyramid across the board for any of your softwares. An example here, for example, so I'm taking an example of a UI. So you like to make sure that when you are testing it at the UI level, you want to use your protractor or WebDriver. In this case, Selenium is one of the leaders of front-end automation. You want to be able to write as many UI tests hitting your app layer. App layer can talk to API layer, or it may not be, but then you would like to make sure that you would limit or mock pretty much any backend service at this point of time, so you could have extensive coverage of your UI. That way your tests are more modular. You would like to ensure that you test the UIs to the limit of the functionality. So we really recommend looking at your test frameworks and ensure that the test cases are as modular as possible and can design to run at a high speed. And when you come back to E2E, at that point you could enable all your backend services. This is where you want to be able to write a little bit complex flows in terms of how the test can go all the way to the backend and come back. You would also like to make sure that the test cases have access to golden data in terms of how the data can be available only for your test cases. You should also look at looking into various error code mechanisms to ensure that there is clear bifurcation of how the errors might originate from either your test infrastructure or your application infrastructure, even inside application, if it is coming from the UI layer or an API layer or a backend layer. It's considerable thought into redesigning your the whole error code mechanism is very helpful. Making the test modular helps as well. That goes well in balance with the whole error code bifurcation that you could do. So at this point, I would like to get into how we as a Screwdriver CI/CD Verizon Media partnered with Sauce Labs to help ensure that we have a continuous testing integrated into a continuous delivery. So as I said, we invested a lot in the automated test suites. We looked at them. We made them modular. We made sure that they have golden data. We made sure that the tests are written in a way that they can be easily broken down into UI layer, functional test layer, end-to-end test layer. That way, there are tests scattered to each of the subsystems. And then we integrated with Sauce Labs, Continuous Testing Cloud. What this enabled us is to ensure that we can run tons of front-end UI automated tests into the Sauce Labs cloud. So how are we using Sauce Labs? So we configure tunnels from our build infrastructure into Sauce Labs cloud. So as an infrastructure, like I mentioned before, we have close to 500 build hosts. So all these hosts will be in a position to talk to the Sauce Labs cloud. So, and we provided an ability in integration into our CI/CD tool, a Screwdriver in this case, where users can easily configure in their pipeline as soon as the build, they would say, hey, please launch launch our tests into Sauce Labs Cloud. So it's pretty much a step called test, where you could call any script and you can define in the script which test you would like to launch. The tests would then have configurations on how to reach the Sauce Labs tunnel, and then you can run battery of tests. You can also, we also enabled a mechanism where you could launch multiple tests from a single CI/CD pipeline. So if, say, for example, a product has 5,000 UI tests, we do have tests that on that scale, then they have an ability to run these tests parallelly as multiple threads into the Sauce Cloud. And then we have an ability to define the quality gates in our CI/CD pipeline, where you could pretty much say if a test fails or a battery of tests fails, you could call your build unstable, or you could fail your build, and you could pretty much block the pipeline from moving forward. So a lot of work has been done to write stable, solid UI tests for our components, for our properties in Verizon Media, because the UI tests, though those seem to be perceivable from the eye, it is it's writing a stable and a solid test case is a complex problem. It has to be authored well. The developers who write the test cases should have expertise and knowledge both on their application, how the data flows, and also the test frameworks. So considerable thought has been given on how we define the frameworks. I would advise the users to really think through and frame your test framework so it is solid and stable from the beginning. At that point, at that point of time, once you have the framework stable and once your test case is modular and solid, it allows you to run these test cases at scale. At that point of time, it's the problem shifts into the infrastructure. The build infrastructure should allow you to run these tests, and then the target test running platform should allow you to run the tests in a seamless way. So 50-50. 50% is how you write your tests, and the 50% is how this test get executed in the platform. And the other angle is how easy you make in your products that you use to configure, launch these test cases. So this is where the integration from between Sauce Labs and Screwdriver really helped our users to make this as a daily habit to build, test, and certify. This is an example. This is an example of how, I hope you can see it, this is an example of how Screwdriver and Sauce Labs integrate into our product. So if you look at this, this is a Screwdriver job where we monitor the Sauce Lab functionality. So just a preview, it talks about how long it took. It probably took a few minutes. And then which container are you running the test? It's on the top header, you could see. And then the time when it ran. And the steps you could see are, you set up some cache, and you start your services. You install all your dependencies. At some point, you run your build. In this case, once you run your build, you execute your tests. If you look closely in the test cases, this is where we launch our test instances of. We are launching around 10 instances of WebDriver. That means you're launching almost 10 parallel threads of your tests, and these tests would launch into. You could see the Sauce Labs Selenium server at a URL, and that would allow you to tunnel into our Sauce Labs cloud. And they run the tests. You could configure your operating system. You could configure your browser where you want to run the tests, and then at the end of the test cycle, you would get the results, and it allows you to move forward to, once it's done, once it's complete, you could publish your library, and you can tear down or capture your logs or whatever you like to. At some point, the pipeline is complete. So for a user, it is as easy as configuring the test or build step and say, hey, I would like to launch this test. And the CI/CD pipeline would take care of running your build, launching the test, getting back the results from the Sauce Labs, and then move forward in your pipeline. In this case, if your tests fail, your pipeline would fail, and then the further propagation of the CI/CD would stop. This is available. This software is available in open source as well, so feel free to try that. This is a graph that shows our activity of continuous testing at scale. Since Screwdriver is a multi-tenant system, pretty much used by everybody at Verizon Media, majority of the products that have UI components, they use Sauce Labs at scale as well. You could see we hit close to like 800 to 700 to 800 daily concurrent jobs. That's a customer concurrency that we have, and we make use of the entire test cloud bandwidth that's available to us. So how would you see the value? So we are in a position to debug and analyze the test results. So whenever the test results come back in the CI/CD, you could implement a quality gate there. If the errors fail, you'll be able to look at your screenshots. I think there's an option to look at videos and really see why and how they're failing. You would also be able to configure these tests at various stages of your pipeline. You could do it at a UI level. You could do it at a subsystem level. You could do it at a system level and an end-to-end test level. So we can run tests at various levels and implement quality gates there. And most importantly, it scales. So we run several thousands of builds, as you saw, 50K plus, and number of builds that we run seems increasing ever. And pretty much every build, a good majority of builds that use UI as a component will run the tests and Sauce Labs. So this whole integration of our build system to the Sauce Labs integration should run like a well-oiled machine for the pipelines to progress further. So we collaborate a lot. There's communities within Verizon Media talking about front-end automation, talking about Sauce Labs. There are engineers in different properties. They collaborate. They share the best practices in terms of what is the best way to run your tests. We work with Sauce Labs teams on a weekly basis, looking at the graphs, just a variety of graphs. One of the examples was the one I showed before. Look at what is error rate. Typically, our error rate is around 2 to 3%, but we look at why the test would error out. We talk to the properties, the users, give them enough information on why these tests are failing. We conduct office hours to kind of provide best practices, and we also do training, shared training. At this point, I would jump onto the results. The results are staggering. So after we implemented Screwdriver and Sauce Labs integration, we run close to more than 2.7 million tests a month. I think the big takeaway here is that when you're implementing CI/CD, quality is a must. Quality cannot be compromised, and quality has to be deeply integrated into your pipelines at various levels. There was a time when the UI tests were laborious and taking a lot of time, more time. The error rate was high. So we have reached a stability situation where the overall testing methodology is deeply integrated into our developers' daily lives, and our test infrastructures are stable in terms of you could run thousands of UI tests today. They get launched from our CI/CD platform, Screwdriver, onto Sauce Labs on a regular basis, on a daily basis. They come back with results. The errors, if they happen, primarily get associated with the errors in the code that will stop the pipeline. You would basically fix the code. If there are places to fix in your tests, you would fix them as well, and then the pipeline goes forever. I think the scale of tests is staggering, and it is attributed to the CI/CD practices that our teams employ and develop, and also the importance to quality that these teams provide. At some point we also had several labs in-house that we used to maintain to enable teams to run the tests. But ever since we moved to Sauce Labs, we were able to save several number of close to 4,500 hours per year. It helps us to concentrate on one problem in our hand. So if we have three layers of several, not just three, if you look at the layers of different systems that exist in enabling the developers to work seamlessly, you have a SCM, source code management system, where the code gets committed, and then you would like them to have developers to raise pull requests, make their builds on a regular basis. So that's where the build infrastructure would come in, and Screwdriver fits in there. Using the Screwdriver as a software, we enable the users to build their systems, configure their pipelines, and then there is a portion of tests that we run. The tests that you run at the API unit test level, they can run in our build containers. When it comes to UI tests, the tests would then offload, launch on the Sauce Labs cloud, and it is the Sauce Labs cloud that provides stability at that level for us. Similarly, at Verizon Media, we have a device lab. If there are mobile tests, they would go run on our mobile infrastructure. At that point, you are trying to publish your artifacts. It could be another piece of software, artifact restores or Docker registry stores that you have. It gets deployed, would get published, and then finally you want to deploy. It could be AWS on your on-prem data centers or whatever it is. So each speech has its own specific area, and Screwdriver pretty much connects the developer from the beginning to the end, where you just start with your code and go all the way to deploy. That's the function of the Screwdriver. And then when it comes to the specific piece of testing in this pipeline, that's when we offload into Sauce Labs, and then we get results back. So we get the best of both worlds. Teams can concentrate on their expertise. I think at this point, if there are any questions, we can have a discussion.
Thank you so much, Venu, for that wonderful presentation, and congrats to you and the teams at Verizon Media for accomplishing all these great success metrics. I know it takes a lot of work, so I know you guys have been doing this for a long time, and thanks again for sharing your insight with us. I think personally, one of my favorite slides, or one of my favorite insights you had, was about the testing communities within Verizon, just building that culture that's committed to quality and sharing those best practices. So I guess as a way of starting the Q&A, I'll start with my own question.
Sure.
How do you keep that community going? How do you keep that conversation going around automated testing best practices?
Yeah, so I think the primary piece of communication is through Slack. So we have communities. I think the developers collaborate a lot. So we have communities for Slack, where pretty much every UI developer is on there, and there are areas of there are experts from these properties who are both good at front-end automation and also Sauce Labs integration. They kind of share their best practices as required. And from my team, since we maintain the build infrastructure, we have specialists. We ensure that we monitor the whole Sauce Labs to Screwdriver to Sauce Labs integration and communication. So I think the Slack communities keep the users honest. The questions get answered on real time, and then we have ways to check the questions that go unanswered. We make sure that we take them back and provide an answer back to the users. Not only that, on a weekly basis, we have meetings with Sauce Labs teams. So we look at errors ourselves, and if we feel, for example, ever since we became Verizon Media, a lot of companies, legacy Yahoo, legacy AOL, they came together. So we had conducted a lot of trainings, and we also have requests for folks to onboard. that we cater, and we make sure that they get onboarded to the testing, continuous testing. So we do several things. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I think with all the collaboration tools we have, it's great to always keep that conversation going.
Yeah.
So we will be continuing with the Q&A. This is a reminder that if you have questions, head over to the questions pane in your control panel and go to webinar, and feel free to send your questions over. I'll start actually with one that was pre-submitted that I thought was really interesting around, you mentioned being able to increase the amount of releases that you were able to do from monthly to at will.
Right.
But do you find that with the implementation of more quality gates throughout your pipeline, have you seen any observations around the decrease in the time it takes to find and fix bugs and repair them? And also with your testing best practices, you've been able to reduce execution time at all?
Right. It's a great question. I think this question talks about the philosophy of CI/CD itself. So I think when we design the CI/CD pipeline for your software, I think we need to take a closer look of how you are architecting your application itself. When we did it for advertising, we really looked at the big blob of subsystem that we had, and we had taken time to break them up into multiple subsystems, so that you'll be able to write individual test cases at the lowest level possible. So I think the big premise is you want to get early feedback on the state of your product. So CI allows you to build continuously, so that as soon as you commit a code, your pull request itself, before you commit, the pull request itself has an ability to be tested on its own before it goes into the pipeline. So that's where you would like to spend majority of your time. So when as a developer, your code is going to make into the pipeline, before it makes the pipeline, you spend a lot of time in terms of making sure you add more test cases, both at the UI test level or at the unit test level or API test level, etc. Ensure that the code is reviewed and tested thoroughly there, and once the pull request is matched, that goes into the actual pipeline. So writing test cases is an art. We need to really figure out how they can be modular, how they can be efficient in terms of initial days where there used to be a lot of sleeps in your infrastructure, sleeps in your code, just to make sure, just to be able to catch up to the infrastructure slowness or your application slowness there. So you would really need to make sure that when you deploy the target system under test, where you run your which you would run your tests on, that software, that system should be stable and high performing. I've seen typically cases where you would always want your production systems to the best systems, and your test systems should be at having a lower end of software infrastructure. I think you should make sure that the systems that you use for testing should also be at a powerful gear equivalent to production, because you would like to, believe it or not, the load at which you would run the tests on your software on the CI is huge, and your system should be able to take care of handling them. So write distributed tests. Make sure your target system is high performing, and then if the ability to run the tests in something like SaaS Cloud or any of your testing clouds, where you could be able to run them fast and provide feedback faster into the pipelines. So yeah, I think we were able to initially, when we started off, it used to take more time, but as we designed stable test systems, we were able to reduce our test efficiency, the overall execution efficiency a lot. I mean, increase efficiency by decreasing the time.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks, Michael, for that question. We have a bunch of other ones coming in now. Thanks everyone for submitting these. Parveen is asking, what quality metrics do you measure and maintain internally at Verizon? Verizon Media, sorry.
Yeah, I think the test execution rate, test error rate, and the test results themselves, in terms of how many you have passed, etc. But my suggestion is, to me, it's once you are in the CI pipeline, once you define the test cases, and you should ensure almost all the test cases are automated. So the basic premise for you to be in a pipeline is that your test case should be automated. At that point of time, the biggest metric that you would look for is the coverage of your test. So because it doesn't depend on number of tests that you have, it depends on the coverage of code from these tests. So write as many tests as possible, but ensure look at the coverage of code in your, you can use SonarQube or Covertura or whatever the code profiling tools that you integrate with. But the biggest metric I would look for is the amount of code that is covered as part of your test cycle.
Great. Yeah, I think that's great insight. Thanks, Venu. We have time for, let's call it 2 more questions. I like this one from Vignesha. Is CI/CD feasible when we don't have enough unit test coverage? He says they have less than 20% unit test coverage. So is that even a possibility to do CI/CD?
I think CI/CD would give you feedback faster. So, for example, the basic, the step 1 is if you have 25% coverage, you would immediately know if the 25% has passed or not the first step. But the CI/CD is successful only when your test rate, the test coverage is huge. I think one of the practices that I have seen people use to increase the coverage is you could basically set a level where any code that gets checked in into your pipeline should always be an increasing factor. You can start with a linear and you can go exponential. You could basically say that your build can fail if the coverage is less than 30%, since you start with 25, and start there. And then once you get 30% coverage, then you can basically level it up and say, hey, it could be, now it's my goal is to have 40% coverage. If the test doesn't have 40% coverage, then the build would fail. But CI/CD is only successful when your code your testing is covered adequately and efficiently, because the biggest advantage of CI/CD is your software can go to the customers at a rapid pace. That means they would be able to see your software several times a day on a regular basis, and you would like to make sure that the software that goes to the customers is of high quality.
Great. Yeah, I think especially us here too at Sauce Labs, when we talk about CI/CD, we're big fans of the walk before you run method. It takes a long time to get to where a team like yours at Verizon Media is at. So you have to start small and then build up from there, start linear and then make it more exponential with time. So I like that feedback. Okay, last question from Mike. He was curious about the slide that showed Screwdriver with Sauce Labs, I assume the dashboard slide. Is there more information on the Sauce Labs integration in the Screwdriver documentation or in your repo?
I think we have information about how you would like to configure, but maybe we probably may not have more information in terms of how the different types of browser coverage, text execution coverage, etc. But I will take this feedback. I'll make sure there is something up there, and we'll communicate back to you through our blog or through Sauce Labs from Alissa. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I know Sauce Labs is really excited about this partnership with Screwdriver and this great open source tool that the team at Verizon Media has donated to the community. So we encourage you to check out their website, screwdriver.cd. This is going to conclude the webinar for today. Sorry we couldn't get to everyone's questions. We'll be sure to follow up with you with an email. Remember, we'll send you the recording. We'll send you this link to the slide share. But again, I want to thank you, Venu, for your time and sharing your expertise. And I want to thank everyone for joining this webinar. And happy testing, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Alissa. And thanks to everybody for taking the time to listen to the webinar. And I'm sure we can communicate more through all the social ways to connect, either through blogs or Slack.
All right. Thanks, everyone.